Anything Can Happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN. With me today are two very really interesting people here in the studio to talk about elephants in conjunction with the World Elephant Day. We have here Dr. Ahhimsa Campos-Arceiz, Professor in the School of Environmental Science at Nottingham University, Malaysia campus, and also Arlene Tan, Executive Director of CETDEM. Today they are going to talk more about conserving elephants in Malaysia in particular. So first of all, I would like to welcome both of you. How are you guys?
Hi, hello, Arlene. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you.
Could you share a bit about your background and how you got involved in the project?
Well, I'm a conservation ecologist, so then I study wildlife and I study their behavior, their ecology, so then what they eat, where they go, and how they affect ecosystems. And I have been studying elephants for the last 10 years or so. I spent 5 years working in Sri Lanka, studying South Asian elephants. And when I finished my PhD, I thought that the Sri Lankan elephants were cool, but I was very keen on working in a place with durians. And then I moved to Southeast Asia because actually this is real. So then I'm very interested in elephants eating big fruits and dispersing big seeds. So then Southeast Asia was the best place, and Malaysia was
not because of Southeast Asia's weather,
yeah,
hot and sunny.
Yeah, it has to do with the type of forest. This kind of tropical rainforest is conducive for big fruits.
So that's the particular reason. And Anthony, we are all here. Of course, we are talking about elephant, but at the same time, there's this event that is happening soon. Walking with elephants. If you can elaborate that, why is this? Why the event is very important and for people to know about it?
Well, 12th of August is World Elephant Day. Not many people know about it.
Not even me.
Well, to be honest, I didn't know about it until CETDEM was approached by J.C. Jacobson Foundation.
What organization is that?
J.C. Jacobson Foundation is a charitable arm of Carlsberg, Malaysia. It's a rather new foundation. They've been around for a couple of years. And one of the reasons why CETDEM decided to be a partner with the foundation is because we find that many foundations do not actually have a good grasp of what CSR is all about, corporate social responsibility. And
many foundations.
Yeah, many foundations. And even in the terms of J.C. Jacobson, the idea of having a World Elephant Day would actually go to Zoo Negara. They have 3 elephants that they have adopted. Go to Zoo Negara and have something there. Which probably bring a group of school children or orphans and have something there. But the foundation's new CSR manager, Sunita, she approached the management and said that why don't you do something different? Work with an environmental NGO, get environmentalists together and have a talk.
The role of foundation when it comes to CSR is supposed to fund for long-term project that has greater impact.
They should. Right now, most foundations, as I said, they're looking at short-term or a one-time event kind of situation. So even in this case with J.C. Jacobson, the talk that was held on the 11th of August, we hope that this is just the beginning of perhaps a quarterly talk. It's not often that foundations and even private organizations like this get environmentalists together, and we were very happy to have Dr. Ahhimsa and 3 other environmentalists.
And how did you manage to get all the different parties to actually focus on elephants, and how the idea of conserving elephants even come in?
Well, the moderator is from the Copenhagen Zoo. Quite interestingly enough, Dr. Carl is Ipoh Mari. So there's a Malaysian connection there. Then you have Dr. Mark from WWF, who also works with large mammals, and Puan Nurul from Perhilitan Selangor. So they are actually related to large animals.
And you're part of this, I guess, organization called MEME, which is, if you ask a millennial, it will mean something else.
Yeah.
But it's actually a short for Management and Ecology of Malaysian Elephants. And you are the principal investigator that is being employed, I guess, by the foundation to...
No.
So how it goes?
I work for the University of Nottingham, the
okay.
Malaysia campus. So then I'm an academic, and then my job is as a faculty. And our project is a research project. So then we do conservation science and capacity building. So then we do research on elephants, the elephant ecology, behavior, and how to conserve them. And we have a group of students, PhD students, master students, and staff who do the research. So I'm based in Nottingham. I work for the University of Nottingham. But MEME is quite a large-scale project. It's a very holistic project that tries to understand elephant conservation from different angles. Then we began this as a project, as an ecological project. And then what we have learned over time is that we need to move well beyond ecology, and we need to be very interdisciplinary and understand people. People is our main challenge and our main target. So not only understanding what elephants eat and how elephants move, but understanding, what people think about elephants, what people care about, and how to reach to people, for people to be more committed with conservation.
So the main focus of the Walking with Elephant is supposed to create awareness about the importance of conserving elephant. But what exactly it means conserving elephant? Because I remember off air, you do make a distinction between what is an actual conserving animals and just being nice to animals.
Yeah. Well, the World Elephant Day was launched in 2012. So it's a very recent thing. So it's normal that people are not very aware of it. And it aims to promote awareness on elephant conservation. And I think it's very important that in Malaysia this has an impact, because this is a global thing. Okay, this happens in Europe. Malaysia is blessed with elephants. It's one of the 13 Asian countries that has wild elephants. And we need to really make a big deal out of it, and we need to create very solid awareness among Malaysians. So about the difference between elephant conservation and elephant welfare is a very important one. So then 1 out of 3 Asian elephants is a captive elephant. It's an animal that doesn't live in the wild. It's living either in an elephant camp in places like in India or in Myanmar or in some parts of Thailand.
And usually what do they do?
Well, these elephants were originally taken from the wild to work in logging operations and maybe some other things like transport and sometimes for status purposes. But nowadays, with the decline of forests and the reduction of logging, many of these elephants are unemployed. They're basically,
Which what I raised offline as well. Like I read a lot of headlines. I mean, it's amusing using the word unemployed towards an elephant.
Yes. But it's true, they used to be a very important workforce in places like in Myanmar. They were a very, very important part of the civil servants for the country. So then your point is very important, is to distinguish the difference between conservation and welfare. I refer to conserving wild populations in their natural habitats, in wild ecosystems. Okay, these are animals that feed on the food that they self-obtain, that they move freely, and that they contribute to ecosystem processes. When captive elephants are animals that are taken care of by people, under the purview of people, normally with food being provided, or less much of it.
So the Koalaganda, the one that we have in, I think, Pahang.
In Pahang, yes, yeah. Koalaganda is an elephant sanctuary. So then these elephants are captive. They were born in the wild, but for different reasons they are now under the care of people.
Would you consider that as conservation, or would you consider it as just being welfare, having welfare towards elephants?
Yes, mainly welfare. There's an element of conservation which is through connecting with people. Okay, so I think people can learn by seeing elephants. So when people, I don't know, the first time I saw an elephant as a European child, I was so impressed when you see wildlife. First you see a tiger, you see an elephant, and I think that moment produces some emotions that can be channel to bring information and create awareness. So I think Koalaganda plays a very important role to connect people with elephants and therefore with conservation. But these elephants will not contribute to the long-term conservation of elephants. Okay, they are not part of the wild population. They will not go back unless we do something very, very specific, that is reintroducing them in the wild, which is not happening right now.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, this is the end of our first segment. We will discuss further on the second segment more about elephants and the state of elephants conservation in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia.
Anything can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. You are back with me at Durian ASEAN, Conserving Elephants, why it matters to Malaysians and the public out there. So we have Dr. Ahhimsa Campos-Arceiz, Professor in the School of Environmental Science at Nottingham University, Malaysia campus, and also Anthony Tan, Executive Director of CETDEM. I would like to go back to Mr. Anthony Tan. I mean, early on we discussed a bit about the event and a bit about the difference between conserving elephants and just being charitable towards elephants' welfare. In your case, you have always been active in terms of environmental issues, especially on Earth. Why the sudden shift towards more on biodiversity and ecology, especially with the focus on animals, wildlife animals?
Well, truth be told, CETDEM actually was involved in biodiversity in the 1980s, 1990s, and even up to the 2000s. But we have been focusing more on urban issues over the last probably 20 years. One of the reasons is we've been always promoting sustainable development since 1995, and we've been looking at appropriate technology. I find that, well, it's time to go back to nature.
So urban farming is just like one of your activities, but your long-term goal is more about how to create a sustainable model for either for Malaysia or just in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
As what I mentioned earlier off air, we do about 40% of our work is on organic farming or urban farming, as you said. Another 60% covers our main area of sustainable development, which covers climate change, transportation, and energy, which is renewable energy and energy efficiency. We find that we need to look at a long-term plan for Malaysia in terms of sustainable development, which is why we are also now involved in the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
So the end goal of this particular project, how does it fit into your larger goal?
It's working with a foundation which is looking into conservation. As an environmental NGO, CETDEM to a certain extent has a freedom in who we can associate with. Very often NGOs per se will find problems working with sin related industry. So for example, most environmental company, even with a 10-foot pole, CETDEM has worked with ExxonMobil, with BP, even with a company like Technip, which does support for oil and gas. Reason, if you don't engage people in that kind of industries, how do you educate them? So when it comes to foundation, yes, it is a foundation owned by Carlsberg, but then how do we engage people in teaching them about responsible drinking if we don't engage them on environmental issues?
Very interesting. On your side of the story, I know you like to talk about elephants, but how does this event relevant to you personally?
Well, again, when we started, we were ecologists looking at the research for conservation. And what is becoming very clear is that if we want to be effective, we need to do much more than research. So then a very important part of our work right now in our activities is outreach and communication. So then we want people to understand why we study elephants, why conservation matters, and how they can play a role in conservation, sustainable development. And I think the urban population is one of our stronger of a kind of
usually when you are a scientist, you work along people who are already the converted, who knows what they are doing, but not the rest of the population.
Yeah. So then we do a lot of efforts to try to escape our silos and understand. So then we work and we communicate a lot with companies, not only as part of our research project, but in part of our bigger conservation work, and definitely try to engage with other stakeholders. So then if we want to conserve elephants, we produce the science. So then we need the government to take action. We need the NGOs to also take some action. We need the civil society to care and to demand proper policies and to demand all these other things that cannot be done if we don't communicate. And it takes time, and it's important to know how to do it well, which often academics are really bad at communication. So then we try to improve on that.
I hear, I guess, re-emerging theme here when it comes to trying to, create greater awareness among the general public. Number one is better communication, not just towards the public, but also among different stakeholders. Yes. What is the hardest, or maybe not the hardest, what is the most challenging part of the project to you?
Well, that's a difficult question. So if you want a very important thing is to understand other people's perspectives. So then, I work with conservation scientists, in which, as you say, we all converted, we're all on the same page, we agree all the time. There's not much controversy going on, right? And as an example, when we talk with students, they tend to be very narrow in what they see. So they often fail to see why governments or if you go on plantations or companies
so you
or
start the blame game coming in.
Yeah, so all this blame game and often is a very naive and very, very narrow perspective in which you don't see the constraints. And what I have experienced at a personal level is the more I talk with people who are different to me, the more I understand what are the barriers. And that's what we need to target. So then it's not about being good or bad in this world. It's not about gaining kind of heaven points. It's about really achieving the outcomes that you are working for. And if you don't know, for example, how KPIs work in the government, or how the budget is being designed, or how is the training, or all these kind of things, doesn't matter how much good science you have, or how much how novel objectives you have, you need to understand how to get things done. And that requires, communicating and breaking barriers. And it is difficult. It's very time-consuming, and no one rewards. I can tell you that not to people like me, not to people in the government, not to people in NGOs. People don't get rewarded for doing these kind of things. But we need to do it, and we need to create a condition in which these things are part of our jobs.
And you mentioned earlier that you spoke to so many people, including you deem those organizations as quote unquote sinful organization. But what is the most what are the things that surprises you the most engaging with different parties that other NGOs would normally?
I agree with very much what Dr. Ahhimsa mentioned about singing to the choir. If you continue just speaking to the converted, not much goes on actually, except probably having a good time with your friends. But in this particular event that we had, originally we targeted 80 people. We ended up having more than 100. It was standing room only in Carlsberg's executive lounge. Some of them came because there was beer being but
there's always the nice part.
But about half of them actually came because they just wanted to know about elephants. And they had no clue what World Elephant Day was about. They had no clue what elephant conservation was about. And, to me, most of them were surprised when they saw, there was a video showed about large mammals, and when they saw this tiger cry.
Oh.
And that hit home. Conservation is just not about looking at animals in a zoo and petting animals and whatnot. the wild animals are being poached, and that was something that really hit home. So for me, when talking to people who are not yet converted and getting them into the conversion mode, quote unquote, it's a long process. But again, once a person has already been convinced, they are the ones that go out and get other people to do our job. And I think, I don't know whether it's something which Dr. Ahhimsa would agree with, but people in the NGO fraternity, we are all out to make ourselves redundant. You're talking about elephants out of a job. When the NGO fraternity is out of a job, we've already achieved what we set out to do. But unfortunately, I was telling my wife, my children already have a job. If as long as they think they're going to work with the NGO, they have a job secured. Because the most difficult thing to do with human beings is to change their mindset and change their habits.
That's true. That's completely true.
Yeah, I agree very much with both things that we need to change people's mindsets, including ourselves, because we need to be always open to be proven wrong and to learn new things. And second, that I would love to be redundant. I mean, that's my personal target. So then in my case, is more through education and capacity building. So then something that I make very clear to my students is that in a few years, I want to be not necessary, to the point that, I can go somewhere else and do something else.
That's
relax,
true.
And the students can take over.
All these require planning, and when you say planning for the long term, it doesn't mean it's just 5 years or 10 years. Is you even mentioned off air, it's like plan for the next half a century. Yeah. So how can different parties or stakeholders be able to do this?
Okay, if I can just kind of go back into a broader perspective about conservation and the story with elephant conservation and why these temporal skills are relevant. So then we're talking about a unique time in history. So in the 21st century is the first time ever that a species, the human beings, is so dominant over the planet. We have more than 7 billion people living in any kind of ecosystems and any kind of climates and environmental conditions. And it has never happened before. And it's going to be the only time in history that we go through this process. So then we are still operating business as usual. Like in the 19th century, like in the 20th century, we have often ways of planning and ways of governing that are similar to this. And I'm not going to suggest a radical change in governance, but we need to understand that in this time in history, if we want to conserve tropical rainforests, we want to conserve our tigers, we want to conserve our elephants, which are precious, and we can talk later why they have to be conserved, we need to change things, because we know that we are in the wrong path. And because our government is, our governments everywhere, not only in Malaysia, is based on cycles of 4 or 5 years. So then for the rulers, all that matters is to reach this target. And then we need to be able to have long-term plans that think about how we will cope with things in 50 years, in 100 years' time, because now it really matters more than ever before.
Anyway, this is the end of our second segment. We will continue the third segment later on.
Anything can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. You are back with me on Durian ASEAN with Dr. Ahhimsa, Campos-Arceiz, Professor in the School of Environmental Science, Nottingham University, Malaysia campus, and also Anthony Tan, Executive Director of CETDEM. Earlier 2 segments, we have discussed quite a number of topics regarding elephants conservation and also regarding some of the issues that is happening around preserving and conserving elephants. Right now, we want to focus more on why the public and also stakeholders, why it matters to them to conserve elephants. Because to me, I mean, for a very shallow person to think about it, like, it's just elephants, if elephants go extinct, you still have other animals, and evolution probably would take care of everything. So why it matters?
Well, I guess the first thing is to point out that the elephants are in danger. Asian elephants are in danger throughout the range. So then right now, Asian elephants are only present in 13 countries in Asia and Malaysia. It's very important for Malaysians to be aware that they are one of the few countries in the world where you can find wild elephants in the 21st century. if we go back in time 15,000 years ago, which is a bit long, but it's not that far away, there were elephants everywhere. Okay, in Trafalgar Square in London, you can find remains of elephants.
In London?
In London. Europe was full of elephants, and Eurasia and North America.
I always thought elephants is more like a Asian thing.
That is because humans...
Or an African thing.
Humans wipe out elephants from almost everywhere, but in Africa and tropical Asia. So then these are the last populations left of elephants, and this is a man-made problem. So then I think we are lucky to live in a place that there are elephants. And you think about modern Malaysia, a place with twin towers, with such a massive development, being able to also have forest and wildlife.
The state of elephants right now in Malaysia, is it really bad?
Well, overall, the situation of elephants is bad because they are endangered, and they will disappear. It's a matter of when. So and it will take 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, but they don't have a very good future. But also I think that in Malaysia the situation is not critical, which means that we have the opportunity to improve it. So I think many countries like in Indochina and some other part of Asia, they have very little options for the future. But I think Malaysia can become the stronghold of elephants in Southeast Asia. So then the message is positive. It's elephants are doing badly, but we can afford to conserve them, and that's
in
the message we have to
Southeast
give.
Asia. That's a bit, I think, too unrealistic, because when you talk about, for a layperson like me, I mean, when you talk about elephants, usually you will associate with Indochina countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia.
In Indochina, in Vietnam, there are less than 100 elephants left, and probably they will not last much longer. In Laos, there might be about 400 elephants. No, in Laos, I believe maybe 600. In Cambodia, 400. And in all these places, conservation is much more difficult. You have much higher human density. You have very strong economic pressure for development. So Malaysia is much more developed. Malaysia has already developed. So Malaysia now has to move in a different kind of development. I think Anthony probably know better about this. More about well-being and experiential development. Not so much about having more cars and having more infrastructure, which Malaysia has a lot already. So, and that's why I think Malaysia has reached a point, some kind of plateau, in which the development can be much more sustainable, and we can preserve the natural resources we have. And we cannot expect the same in other countries. So I think Malaysia is richer, has less people, and has the capacity, has a governance, has a very stable governance system, has a very developed capacity, human capacity. So I think is the place where we're in a better position to conserve elephants and tigers in the future. If
Malaysia is in a position where we have all the resources and all the manpower and I guess brain power as well to conserve elephants, why we are not there yet? Because again, we're in a unique time in history. We are now in a transition in which we need to understand that what we were doing at the second half of the 20th century or early 21st century is not going to lead to conserve biodiversity in the way we want. So then I think Malaysia is in a better position to do this transition faster than, let's say, Cambodia or Vietnam. So then we're not there yet, but Malaysia can do it. So that's the job of people like me, try to convince the younger generation that they have an opportunity to contribute to conservation. Do you think the government played a key role of trying to, flip the coin, trying to make things better, but they're just not doing their job? Well, I think governments everywhere in the world, they always say a bit conservative change. The change is normally led by people like Anthony. It's the civil society and is the people who think forward, the social leaders who need to be visionary and say this is what we want, and then demand the government to do these changes. And I think often for good reasons governments need to change slowly. So I think they need to be faster than we are right now, but also makes sense to have a gradual and a solid change. So I think Malaysia has the advantage of having a very solid governance system. And I always talk this with my students and with people. Malaysians tend to be very critical of the government. But I always say, no government is good. And I come from a country where there is a lot of corruption nowadays. And I look at the United States, and I look at Trump's, and I look Brexit, and think like, well, you tell me where things are doing well. So I think Malaysia has solid governance, has a strong economy, and has natural resources. So it can really do conservation. Something that Malaysia has as well is very good policies. Okay, so then we have a national biodiversity policy, which is really
cutting edge. It's very, very modern and scientifically sound. We have a very important plan that I think Malaysians don't know much about, but it's a fantastic, very exciting plan called the Central Forest Spine that aims to connect.
Wow, the name itself gives me the chill when you say spine.
So the idea is to connect the different patches of forest, the big patches of forest throughout Peninsular Malaysia, and make sure there is connectivity in the long term. So as we build more roads and with it, the agriculture expands, that these forests don't become islands. And then in the case of elephants, we have a National Elephant Conservation Action Plan, the NICAP, which is a good plan. It's a solid plan. So then the plans are not the problem, and the policies are not the problem. The problem in this case for conservation in Malaysia is the implementation of the plans and the enforcement of the laws.
Talking about implementation, I do have to ask our NGO friend here, Anthony Tan, because off air, the three of us, we discuss about how I guess this is just something that is unfortunate, like things that when it comes to distribution of power, like it's very unclear, like the state government and the federal government, who owns what, who gets what, and who controls what. If you can just break it down, like how it works. And
well, I usually end up giving people years. 1948, the formation of the Federation of Malaya, from the federated and unfederated Malay states, and also the colonies of Malacca and Penang. Then you have 1957, the Merdeka, and 1963, the formation of Malaysia. And unfortunately, even politicians forget that Malaysia is formed, or was formed, by 4 countries: Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. Because Singapore is no longer part of Malaysia.
So Sabah and Sarawak is countries at that time?
Countries, which is why they are the only states in Malaysia, inverted commas, which have ministers. The rest of the states have executive councillors, excos. So each of our states in Malaya, and whenever I say Malaya in Sabah, Sarawak, I get applause. But each of the states in Malaya have their own sort of mini constitutions, and they have their own state laws. And one of the laws, or one of the areas where the states have a stronger say versus the federal, is in terms of minerals and also in terms of natural resources.
So it's more, their income is more like commodity-based income or revenue.
Yes.
So when it comes to preserving wildlife, do you think they have any benefit or incentive towards the state government?
Well, I think Tony has raised a really key point, and I think it's one of the main problems for conservation in Malaysia right now. And is this conflict of jurisdiction between the state and the federal government. So then all these good policies that we're discussing, all these CFS and the biodiversity policy, are done at national level, and then they are approved in Putrajaya, and I have been in many meetings in which very well educated, very, very capable people agree on very good ideas, but then they are implemented at state level. And the federal government cannot impose the implementation. The implementation has to be negotiated, and each state can choose to implement or not. And because the states...
When you say they can choose, that means if they decline, it's because they don't have the resources, or what?
They have the freedom to decide to... There is not the priority, or they want to do something different. Yeah. And then... as you were saying now, they don't have the incentives to work in many of these things that have to do with conservation, because it often goes against their own short-term financial interest. Because the states finance themselves from natural resources, things like logging and mining. If you ask them to protect a patch of forest as a protected area, then they stop generating revenue from this forest, and they don't have all the sources. So then right now, we have created a kind of a lock-in situation in which the states need these natural resources to finance themselves, because they really need money. And I think in Malaysia, states are poorer than the federal government. So they need to generate money. They need to pay many bills at the end of the year. And it's really, really important. And the only way they can do that, because of the framework of the Constitution, is to exploit the natural resources. So then that was fine in the 1950s, 1960s, when this was a very important source of revenue for Malaysia. But as we move into a much more knowledge-based economy, these commodities don't produce much money. So basically we are pushing them to overexploit resources at a very low benefit. So then the country as a whole is losing a lot. Every time we cut forest in Temengor, we cut forest in Ulumuda, in Kedah, we are losing really valuable biodiversity, long-term capital for the country, for short-term economic benefit for the state. So I think we need to really reconsider how states should be financed and create a mechanism for them to get other forms of income, so they can put aside more forest for conservation, more habitat for elephants and for tigers, in a way that is not against their own interest, but is a win-win situation.
I'd like to add to that. CETDEM's chairman, Gurmeet Singh, he's not just an environmentalist, he's also a social activist, and he has been advocating the federal government relook how the especially income tax is being used, and a portion of the income tax should actually go back to the state for the state to undertake conservation activities, because say for example a state like Selangor or even Penang, large portions of the federal income tax comes from these two states. Third would probably Johor, but none of this actually goes back to the state coffers. If there's any kind of contribution done by the federal, it would be in terms of infrastructure or some other form of benefit, but not in a form where the state can decide where the money goes.
Okay.
Within the conservation, the Convention for Biological Diversity, countries made a pledge of setting aside 17% of the land for protected areas, for national parks and other protected areas. And Malaysia is way behind that, and it's because of this problem.
I see.
And then looking in the global picture, it seems surprising that Malaysia is not protecting places like Temengor in Perak, Ulumuda in Kedah, and so many other forests in Pahang and
these are,
Terengganu.
I would say, poor states, as in like they are not receiving much income.
Let me put it this way: Malaysia is a very rich country.
Okay.
So then, when we talk about poor states, is that something's wrong? The money is not flowing the right way. So Malaysia is a country is very developed. The GDP per capita is $25,000, which is very high. It's in the same area of many European nations. So I think Malaysia has the economic resources. Just the distribution probably. Governments is not appropriate to achieve the objectives that they have to do. So this can be changed, and we had an event last January to discuss about how this can be changed, and we got some constitutional scholars, and they were saying that we don't need to change the constitution. It's just a matter of how it is interpreted. So I think that's very good news, and so that we need to think about how we can do changes that promote the conservation of natural resources, particularly tropical rainforest, and the wildlife living there, which is really precious, and Malaysia really benefits from it.
So my advice is one agency at a time. Anyway, this is towards the end of our discussion, but I want to highlight the event that had happened, I think early this month, regarding on walking with elephants, and also just some important facts or interesting information about elephants and conservation that you may share. Perhaps would you like to share the work that you have been doing at MIM?
Yeah, so MIM is studying elephant ecology and behavior from different angles. We are studying also how to mitigate the human-elephant conflict, which I think is the main problem for long-term elephant conservation in Asia in general. And we are also training the next generation of conservation scientists in Malaysia, particularly elephant conservation scientists. But if I can end up with a few ideas, I think that the top priorities for elephant conservation in Malaysia, I would suggest looking at the way that we can implement the policies that we have. So then, things like how to create more engagement from the states. I think we need to protect connectivity in our landscapes. We have this plan, the Central Forest Spine. That is a very good plan. We need to implement it. Make sure that in 5 years, 10 years time, when we look back, we don't see what a missed opportunity we had. Okay, we had the ideas, it was doable, and we missed the chance. And we need to mainstream conservation. So then right now conservation is being left for a few NGOs and the wildlife department.
Like CETDEM.
Yes, and we need to make sure that conservation is not just a matter of a few a few tree huggers and geeks or small agencies like the Wildlife Department, but it's something that affects other agencies, other stakeholders from the private sector to the civil society. And then, of course, we need to enforce the law. So then things like elephant poaching need to be changed and need to be curbed, and it's not acceptable. And the society needs to be aware that it's not acceptable to consume, illegal wildlife. It's not acceptable to buy or to poach these things. And people need to become more aware of the importance of conserving elephants, not the wildlife.
To be more aware, you can go to their website. It's meme-elephants.org. Elephants with an S, and meme is spelled as MEME. And you can also go to their Facebook. So your Facebook is Facebook or meme.project. So from there you can see the latest stuff that they are producing, and you also publish newsletters, right?
Yeah, our students, MIM is a group of about 18 people right now, and our students produce a newsletter every 6 months, and it's a very interesting newsletter, so then it can be found in our Facebook. And I very much encourage people to go and read and give their feedback, and we're very happy to communicate about elephants. Elephants are very interesting species, and we are very happy to talk and engage with other people who might be interested in this.
Mm-hmm. And for CETDEM, of course, everyone knows what is CETDEM, especially on urban farming, but they also do a lot of really interesting projects other than that, and you can check more about them at cetdem.org.my. And if you want to know more about their project on a talk on elephant conservation, you can actually go to their page and just scroll down a bit. So but unfortunately, you don't have the YouTube video of the discussion, right?
No.
Only audio?
Only audio.
Will you be uploading soon?
I should be able to upload it soon.
MIM has a YouTube channel on elephant videos. So if people want to see some videos about elephants, you can just look for MIM, the management and ecology of Malaysian elephants in YouTube, and we have very cute videos of elephants walking in the forest, eating durians and doing many interesting things. These are wild elephants.
I think when you say cute elephants, everyone will go and watch it. Anyway, thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Ahhimsa, and also Anthony Tan.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks to you, Arlene.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Durian ASEAN. For more interviews by Durian ASEAN, please tune in to our website at durianasian.com. If you're on the go, you can always download our TuneIn app on your mobile. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels at Durian ASEAN and Durian ASEAN TV. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. We always welcome feedbacks from our listeners. Stay tuned with Anything Can Happen Friday every week. Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.
You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.